राइट. सेकेंड इज, यहाँ इन्होंने ये नहीं बताया whether this turnover is of current financial year or previous financial year. आप आपकी 20 lakhs की लिमिट क्रॉस कर गए, राइट. You are opting for this composition scheme up to 50 lakhs rupee. Composition scheme you can avail. What about after 50? या तो फाइनेंशियल ईयर की बात कर रहे हैं ना, ये तो 30 तक तो आपने चार्ज कर लिया कंपोजिशन का रेट. उसके बाद नॉर्मल स्कीम में आओगे आप, टर्नओवर आपको पूरे साल का बोल रहे हैं, तो यहाँ पर आपने 1% 2% जो भी रेटिंग की है वो दे दिया. उसके बाद क्या होगा? There is not clarity actually. They should have specified whether it is current financial year. It can't be current financial year actually. They have to say previous financial year actually. But that will be the basis whether your turnover is this or that. Current year financial keep fluctuating actually. Existing taxpayer, you are already your turnover in the previous financial year say 1 crore rupee. You say I want to avail this composition scheme. Whether you will be allowed? If we go by the plain reading, it will be allowed. Well, what they are saying, aggregate turnover of the financial year. They didn't say previous financial year or current financial year. But who will allow you to avail this scheme? The proper officer. They will prescribe certain terms and conditions actually. So when we will see that your turnover in the previous financial year 1 crore, you won't allow. But they need to clarify this also. If you make a interstate supply, you can't avail composition scheme, right? No composition scheme. एक single transaction भी आपने कर दिया, you will out of the scheme. All registered person, taxable person with same PIN, same command account number, all registered taxable person also have to opt for this scheme. आपके 4 ऑपरेशन डिफरेंट स्टेट्स में हैं. बंगाल वाला बोल रहा है कि सर मैं कंपोजिशन में जाऊंगा, बिहार वाला मैं नहीं जाऊंगा. You can't. Everybody will have to avail this, right? अभी आपने चारों ब्रांच एग्री कर गए कि ठीक है सर कंपोजिशन में जाते हैं. बिहार वाले ने एक इंटरेस्टेड सप्लाई कर दी, आउट. द मोमेंट ही इज आउट, यू आर आल्सो आउट. तो दे मेड इट सो कॉम्प्लिकेटेड एक्चुअली. वो झक मार के बोलते ना कि वो रेगुलर स्कीम में आ जाओ, कंपोजिशन में इतना लफड़ा है. एंड द गवर्नमेंट आल्सो डजंट वांट एक्चुअली. व्हाट इज द टैक्स रेट? Not less than 1% of your turnover. Turnover को उन्होंने डिफाइन नहीं किया. जो चीज डिफाइन करने की होती है उसी को डिफाइन नहीं करते हैं. टर्नओवर बताया नहीं कि इट इज एग्रीगेट टर्नओवर. इट कांट बी एग्रीगेट टर्नओवर. लेकिन टैक्स रेट जो है, अब टैक्स पे करो किसके ऊपर? टैक्सेबल सप्लाईज के ऊपर, राइट? टर्नओवर डिफाइन नहीं किया, बट फॉर ऑल प्रैक्टिकल पर्पसेस इट विल टर्नओवर इन द स्टेट, राइट? तो इंटर स्टेट तो अलाउड ही नहीं है. तो टर्नओवर इन द स्टेट मींस क्या? यहाँ पर भी वही एग्रीगेट का कंसेप्ट है. ऑल टैक्सेबल, नॉन टैक्सेबल, एग्जेम्प्ट, एक्सपोर्ट, एवरीथिंग इज इंक्लूडेड हियर. They mention not less than 1% here. If you go by the provision of section 8, they mention not less than 1%. My question is it really 1%? अब मॉडल जीएसटी लॉ आपने देखा नहीं है, तो basically they are saying it's not less than 1%. But your model GST law is in 2 parts. First part, central GST and state GST, right? In the context of Bengal, क्या होगा? अभी central government in parliament will pass central GST act. West Bengal government will pass in the state assembly West Bengal Goods and Service Tax Act. There will be 2 acts. Section 8 says not less than 1%. तो CGST में क्या आएगा? Not less than 1%. State GST में क्या आएगा? Not less than 1%. तो basically you end up paying 2%. Whatever is the rate, not less than 1% बोला, it may be 2%, 4%. You have to double it. Reverse charge will be applicable in case of composition scheme also. Restrictions, you can't issue a tax invoice here. It has to be, because you can't, you have to issue a bill of supply here. You can't issue a tax invoice, that is the basic condition. You can't avail any input tax credit. These 2 conditions are there. If you avail this scheme wrongfully, then you have to pay 100% tax as per the normal rate जो tax liability है, and equal to 100% penalty. आपको मालूम नहीं है, गलती से आपने ये स्कीम अवेल कर ली, तो ये penal provisions. Exemptions only one section, section 10, deals with exemption. It gives power to the central or state government to exempt absolutely or subject to partial exemption, full exemption, subject to condition, without conditions. They can, based on the recommendation of the GST Council, they may. Right? Here, they issue notification or by special order. Only one issue here is section 10(3). What it says, आपने एक नोटिफिकेशन इशू कर दिया एग्जेम्पशन का, बाद में गवर्नमेंट को समझ आया कि यार स्कोप एंड एप्लीकेबिलिटी प्रॉपर्ली डिफाइन नहीं किया उसका जो होता है. They can issue another notification, and that another notification will have effect retrospective. Within 1 year, they can issue another notification to clarify the scope and applicability of the original notification, and it will have a retrospective effect. तो पहले आपको बोलिए सर आपका एग्जेम्प्ट है स्कोप एक साल के अंदर समझा कि सर एग्जेम्पशन नहीं है. They issue another notification for that. What will happen to you? You already availed the benefit. It will again end up in litigations. Zero rate. They said that you are saying that zero rate supply will be there. Actually, it won't be zero rate. It will be exempt supply. Zero rate works in case of export, where you can claim refund. What actually they mean, it is a exempt supply. Around 53% in the consumer price basket is going to be in the exempt list. Recently they said around 80 items. Again, area-based exemption is there. Again, system, there are two type of, one is refund-based, one is exemption-based. Refund-based is Jammu and Kashmir में, Himachal, इस सब में, उत्तराखंड में, you have exemption-based system. And the GST will be exemption-based. First you charge, refund-based होगा GST में. First you charge the tax so that you be in the credit chain, and then you claim a refund. जो industries हैं, they have to claim a refund, and there will be suitable budgetary provision for that. Friends, I've already covered my presentation. It's already 7:15. Shivani is already there. So if she will take up time and supply, time and place of supply. So if you have any question.
So export, in case of export, whether you will get refund of GST?
Yes, sir. Export will be zero rate supply. If there be any input tax on procurement of goods and services, you can claim a refund of that.
एक प्रोसेस ऑफ ऑप्टिंग आउट थोड़ा बता दीजिए फिर से.
किसका सर?
कोई छोटा एसएससी जो कि इसको प्रोविजनल एजुकेशन मिल गया और ऑप्ट आउट करना चाहता है कैसे करेंगे?
और सर उसका एक फॉर्म है, वो जब रजिस्ट्रेशन में डिस्कस करेंगे ना माइग्रेशन प्रोविजन में, दे विल टेक अप दिस पार्ट. बट सेक्शन 142 सबसेक्शन 6,
142(6)
यस, उसमें ऑप्ट आउट प्रोविजंस है, तो वो आप कर सकते हो.
Taxable turnover is less than 20 lakh, so it's not compulsory for registration.
Yes,
So it's a voluntary.
Yes,
So
yes.
if I've taken opted for voluntary registration, then for every supply I have to charge a tax.
दैट्स 20 लाख से लिमिट तो रहेगी सर. आपने बाउंड्री रजिस्ट्रेशन ले लिया,
It's
लेकिन
not compulsory that.
नो नो
So कुछ पर charge कर सकते हैं तो नहीं.
पार्टनर
On some supply you can charge some, on some supply.
नहीं सर, वैसे नहीं होगा. यदि आप चार्ज करोगे सब पे करना पड़ेगा. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for interactive session and a pleasant evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kawal, for such a nice deliberation. Our next speaker is C.A. Shivani Saha. I welcome C.A. Shivani Saha on the dais. I would like to request C.A. Saurabh Chatterjee, please come on the dais and present a bouquet to C.A. Shivani Saha. Saurabh Chatterjee, I think he is not present, so I request Mr. Satish Kumar. Shivani Sahar is a fellow member of ICAI and qualified in the year 2005. She is an ex-PwC employee. She worked with a consultancy company as a senior tax manager till 2008. Currently, she is in self-practice under Shivani Sahar and Associate, specializing into indirect taxation. She has given lectures in so many seminars, conferences and workshops. His articles has been published in many professional magazines. She was the co-opted member of the Women's Committee of EIRC ICI for the year 2014-15. She was also on the editorial board of DTPA for indirect taxation for 2014-15. She was the past and the present member of the taxation committee of EIRC and past chairman for the indirect tax committee for various views exchange. She was on the impaneled member of the career counseling body of the Institute of Chartered Accountant of India. Now she will deliberate on the topic time and place of supply. She is just coming. If you have any questions, you may ask Mr. Agarwal.
Levy exemption, if you have any question, you can please ask. You can have the...
One question.
Sure, please.
Input tax credit are presently allowed for manufacturing concerns if it is directly in relation to the manufacturing of that product. So in GST, if it is in the furtherance of the business, will that be restricted to the manufacturing output of the product, or it will be in gross credit?
Sir, they are going to make some changes in the definition actually. Earlier they say that for the manufacture of outward supply, something sort of that. So they are going to make some certain amendments actually. But they are restricted. Suppose your audit service, right? It's not for making any outward supply, right? It's in relation to, it may be in relation to outward supply, you can avail, you're availing input tax credit on that. But as per the definition, you can't. So session is gone, they are going to make changes in that.
Okay friends, a very good evening to all of you. Today is the first day at the workshop for GST, right? So, thank you so much. If I may ask you, what was the topic that you discussed in the first half of the deliberation by Agarwal ji? Loud, because you see, he's the one who spoke for close to 1.5 hours. So, आपके तरफ से तो answer should be prompt and more loud. You've had a round of tea already, right? Yes or no?
Yes.
Veena, I'm sure you served them a round of tea. You want another one? Yes or no? See, I'm afraid I had done a lot of homework, but I have a son who's 1.5 years who's very unwell, and unfortunately I left the book behind, and hence the deliberations will now be very limited. But nonetheless, see, when you talk about GST, I'm sure all of you have attended a lot of sessions, deliberations, seminars, giving you an idea about what GST is all about. Yes or no?
Yes.
Great. Now see, the entire idea of this workshop, which was organized by the Institute, was to give you a brief on these specific topics which have been listed down in the workshop. In the first half, you did levy and exemptions, right? And my topic for deliberation is time and place of supply. Now, before I move any forward, first and foremost, how many of you all are carrying a copy of the model GST law with you? Henceforth, I'm sure you have deliberations by different speakers over the next couple of days or weeks. First and foremost, make sure that you have a copy of the model GST law, without which it will be very difficult for you to follow what the speaker is trying to say. See, the model GST law is available. I'm sure the hard copies are available, or you can find it on the internet. Take a printout, get a spiral bind done, and start making notes. Like, just to give you an instance, since I forgot my model GST law, I borrowed it from Agarwal ji, and he's got these small notes which has been made. See, the idea of GST is that today, standing on this side of the dais, since indirect tax is my subject, I have read the law a little more than any one of you have, right? And since I have been doing indirect taxes for the last 10 years now, so maybe I have a slight edge on understanding the law than any one of you who are not into indirect taxes as of now, but want to get into IDT, and now which will be primarily GST. So first and foremost, just a few minutes before I get into the specific of the topics, how many of you are here today for this session for an understanding of GST, so that tomorrow when this GST is a law, many of you here can start a practice in GST? How many of you here? And the rest, maybe just for a bare basic understanding, because as they say, the basic mantra for chartered accountants is what? You have to unlearn what you've learned and then relearn. And hence I say that always carry a copy of the model GST law with you. Now, we have precisely 1 hour to go. Now, first of all, what is the full form of GST? Sorry? Goods and? First and foremost, it's not goods and service tax, it's goods and services tax. And just to give you an overview, currently you have n number of taxes existing at the indirect tax level, both at the center and the state. So just as a quick run through, what taxes are being now covered within the umbrella of GST? See, let's divide the audience into 2 teams. So let's have this part of the hall first answer, then we can have that part. And I'm sure Beena can arrange for a gift at the end, whichever team wins. And how you distribute it amongst yourselves, it's a call you need to take. Now, as of now, I'm okay with giving you a free gift. But once GST comes in, I do not know whether I need to pay GST on the gift that I give you. And hence, abhi jitne gift aap le sakte ho, le lo. So hence, what kind of taxes are being covered within the umbrella of GST? Central excise, VAT, service tax, excise duty to ho gaya na? Cess and surcharge. Okay, I have my doubt on that. This side? CBD, not the basic custom duty, luxury tax, entertainment tax, so on and so forth. So you see, what was the idea behind GST? One country, one tax, right? So the idea was, as of now, you have different taxable events. When you talk about central excise, you have a taxable event of manufacturing and the charging section under section 3. But the point of collection of central excise is at the time of removal of the goods from the factory. When you talk about VAT, what is the taxable event? Supply, that is the transfer of property and goods. When you talk about service tax, what is the taxable event? Rendition of service. And what is the point of collection or payment of service tax? It is as per the point of taxation rules 2011. So you see, across board, when you talk about IDT, you have different taxable events. When you talk about chartered accountants, it's very simple. We are not registered with VAT, we are not registered with central excise. But think of a company who's got multiple registrations. When you talk about, say for example, an assessee belonging to the F&B or the hotel industry, they have VAT, they have service tax, they may also have things like luxury tax, entertainment tax, so on and so forth, right? So the idea was, let's bring all of this together under the umbrella of GST. And one big advantage that we foresee with GST coming in is that the taxable event across board will become common, right? So today there's a lot of hue and cry that whether an item is goods, whether an item is manufacturing. When I attend the tribunal, I still see hearings going on that what is manufacturing? Central excise is a law of 1944, and till date the courts are delving on the topic of manufacturing. So the idea of GST was or is that the taxable event now becomes, what is the taxable event under GST? Supply. And let me tell you friends that when you talk about supply, again, as you had n number of issues and litigations on the topic of manufacturing, has service been defined under the Finance Act? Yes or no? This side of the audience, yes or no? Yes. And that side? So it was only in 2012 when the negative regime of services was brought in place that they first time took the effort of defining the term service. Right? When you talk about sale, then the definitions are already there under the respective VAT acts. Under the model GST law, which is not yet an act and hence we should not refer to anything as a section, but I beg your pardon for doing that, it should ideally be called clause. But when you talk about the term supply, it finds its place under section 3 of the model GST law, which again starts with the word includes, and hence the scope of coverage under the taxable event of supply is very huge. Right? Today, are you paying any VAT on stock transfers? No. Why? It's for your own consumption. Okay. Any other answers?
Not transfer property. Same person.
So you have a concessional form F. As long as you can procure that and provide it to the concerned authorities, there is absolutely no charging of VAT on stock transfer. That is because you are basically, this is movement of goods from one place to the other, but it's primarily to one's own self. Even in service tax, you have a concept that supply of service to your own self will not be subject to service tax. But will stock transfer now be taxable under the GST regime? Yes or no? Yes. Now, when you talk about supply, they have annexed schedules 1, 2, etc. wherein under schedule 2, they want to tax certain transactions, or rather let's put it this way, that they say certain transactions will now fall within the ambit of supply even if there is no consideration. And for the first time in the model GST law, in fact across, when you talk about Finance Act, the Central Excise, Customs, to my knowledge they have never defined the term consideration. Under the model GST law they do define the term consideration. But nonetheless they say that in certain cases, as given, they have pointed out 5 instances under schedule 2 wherein these 5 transactions will fall within the ambit of supply even if there is no consideration, but from one taxable person to another. So say for instance, I have an office in Calcutta and my factory is in Assam. So when the goods are being stock transferred from Assam to Calcutta, will I be counted as 2 separate taxable persons for GST purposes, or will I be counted as a single taxable person? Separate. And in fact that brings home another point, that under the GST regime, there will be absolutely no concept of centralized registration as far as service tax is concerned. Today, if you see the visiting card of any chartered accountant, I can say a majority of them may have branch offices, at least 5-6 branch offices to hote hain. How many of you all are into audit here? No offense meant, but how many branch offices do you have? This means what? 5, 3, 2, 1. Today, for the purpose of service tax, assuming you are falling within the ambit of service tax, so he chooses to have a centralized registration for service tax very well within the framework of law, as long as he has centralized accounting or billing at any one of the location. He can choose to have a centralized registration at that location. So how many returns are you filing? 2. But now you will not be having, or you will not be given the benefit of a centralized registration, and hence each and every office will have to seek a separate registration, and behind each such office or a taxable person or an entity, you will have to file a minimum of 37 returns. But anyways, there is a huge hue and cry. In fact, even in the early stages of the release of model GST law, one of the pet topics playing the devil's advocate on this law was 37 returns, oh my god, huge opportunity for chartered accountants. In fact, a lot of chartered accountants as speakers still maintain that. But to my knowledge and limited understanding, the data auto-population plus the network in itself, what you call popularly the GSTN, will be a robust system wherein even though you are filing 3 returns in a month, it will not be a very huge affair. But obviously that this matching concept that they've gotten, that may initially play a bit of a hazard. But by and large, over the period of time, everyone will get very accustomed to the idea of filing 37. I would rather call it a statement rather than return in a year. Added to that will be another 12 if you are falling under reverse charge, and added to that will be another 12 if you are falling within the ambit of the TDS provisions. So in fact, I was at one of the lectures which was organized by DTPA, and Sushil ji was one of the speakers there, and his sense of humor is indeed very good. So he said that, "Bhai, आपके साल में कितने हफ्ते होते हैं? How many weeks? 52. And how many returns is even a chartered accountant's office, say for instance, if falling within TDS and reverse charge, will need to file 61. So अभी तो जब आप लोग रिटर्न फाइल करते हैं सर्विस टैक्स का, भाई यू पुट अ रिमाइंडर, मार्च का 25 अप्रैल के अंदर करना है, एंड फॉर September you need to file within the 25th of October. Now you will have to set a reminder of more than one reminder a week to file your own returns. So think about the case wherein भाई GST में किसी को practice नहीं करना है when you talk about the litigation bit, because there you will have a lot of people already wanting to do that. As I said, for people who had an edge in terms of having an experience in the line of IDT. But even for chartered accountants, how many of you all here are not practicing IDT at all? So rest are practicing IDT, is it? Then my questions will be to only people who have not risen their hands. So the idea was that even if you don't want to get into the litigative bit of it, as far as the procedural compliance is concerned, there will be good amount of work even if you handle these statements or returns for your own clients. And when you talk about the transitional provisions, which I think tomorrow one of the speakers is taking up, then you'll understand that how it's now, starting today, that you can add value to your existing clients and not wait till the 1st of April when GST is actually in place. Because there are far too many planning tools which are available to you based on the model GST law today. Say for instance, I'm sure many of you have clients who are falling within the ambit of VAT. Yes? All of you are chartered accountants here, right? No?
Yes.
Outside city. Who? Okay. But by and large, I'm assuming that you all are practicing chartered accountants or chartered accountants in service. But under VAT, at least when I get to interact with my clients, a lot of clients have this thing कि भाई अभी पैसे नहीं है, tax का payment नहीं हुआ है, so let's not file the returns. We will file the return with a nominal late fee of 500 rupees. How many of you have experienced this? Many of you. Even with service tax, the idea is भाई गलत return file कर दो, ऊपर में you will have a pop-up or a prompt कि भाई this and this is wrong, revision कर देंगे 60 or 90 days, whatever the available time period is. How many of you all have experienced this issue? Right? See, I see a big grin in the audience. But you think this, I wouldn't really call it a facility, but for the lack of a better term, let's say facility, will be available to you for any of the returns which you file as on 31st March or for the period ending 31st March 2017? Yes or no? No. Why? See, I again repeat, any of you sitting there today is at par with me. I can't talk about him, he's too senior for me, but मैं अपने लिए बोल सकती हूँ that my knowledge on the subject, as I said, maybe a little more only in terms of my limited experience in doing IDT, or because I had to address an August gathering like you, तो थोड़ा बहुत पढ़ना पड़ता है, so that at the end 8:30 जब आप घर जाओ, you can tell your respective spouses कि भाई आज बहुत काम करके आए, give me a कड़क cup of chai. And obviously with this demonetization, I'm sure a lot of you must be unbalanced. So the idea is to maintain your balance at least in the course of this deliberation, so that at the end of this session, each one of us, including me, is a little more richer on the knowledge than what we are today. In fact, I wanted to attend my first half also, but since my son was unwell, I couldn't make it for the first session. So hence, I want the answers to be a little loud and crisp, please. So my question was, will this facility be available to you as on 31st March? Answer is no. Now I ask you the reason why. आगे वाले को Okay. See, there is a specific subject. There are few there's a specific chapter and a couple of sections starting from 142, precisely under the CGST and the SGST law, which deals with the transition provisions. And the first, someone is taking up in this entire string of workshops that you have. That is one topic. One of the first and the foremost things they say that whatever credit is reflecting, see, I'll be going into the specific of my topic also, but what I can gather from the knowledge level of the audience is that we need to discuss a little more of generic stuff and then perhaps come to the specific topic. Is that okay with all of you? Are all of you on board with me for that? Great. So the idea is that whatever returns you are filing for the period 31st March 017 and whatever credits are reflecting there under, as long as those credits are also eligible within the GST regime, only those credits will be available to you as a credit under GST. Am I clear? Say for instance, what is the planning tool in this? So there may be an invoice which you come across, which say for example is of service tax, and you are a chartered accountant. You are not very sure iska credit lena hai ki nahi lena hai. There is litigation on the subject. What we advise our clients, avail the credit. Maybe you don't utilize it as of now, but at least let it stay in your return. That means what? A, you should do a thorough credit analysis of your clients or of your respective offices as far as these indirect taxes are concerned, primarily service tax, VAT and excise, and make sure that you are availing all the credits that you feel are eligible credits. Any credit which is lost now in terms of not showing it in the return or any other reasons, how much ever eligible it is even under GST, will not be allowed to you. Are we clear on this? Now the idea is, what is credit available today, what is credit available tomorrow? So as of now, when you talk about SENVAT credit rules, they guide the SENVAT credit provisions as far as service tax and excise is concerned. You have some restrictions. So we were very hopeful that once GST is in place, these restrictions will be done away with. Say for instance, today when I build a house and I rent it out. So what is my output service tax? My output service tax is on renting. And say for instance, while I was building my house, I had availed and utilized the services of a contractor. And the contractor charged me an N number of service tax, which is against a valid invoice, and I have a duty paying document. So am I eligible to take the input service tax credit of the service tax charged by the contractor against my output service tax liability of renting of immovable property? Yes or no?
Yes.
This side of the audience? Yes. And that side?
Yes.
The credit will be carried.
Yes.
The answer is no. Because, not for any fault of yours or mine, but such is the drafting of the law. Likewise, there are certain restrictions which have been imposed on construction services. Say for example, if you avail the services of construction from a vendor who has helped you build a factory, then again if you are a service provider and you may be having some output excise duty liability, you are not allowed to take the credit. The idea was that you restrict the credit. So we thought that all these restrictions should be done away with. How many of you all are doing income tax here? So in income tax, as far as it's an eligible business expenditure, that's allowed as a deduction by debiting to your P&L account. So in fact, the same logic should have been carried forward also as far as ITT is concerned. The idea is you keep the tax rates high, we don't mind, but do not stop this flow of credit. Allow a seamless flow of credit across board. But nonetheless, this concept was not taken cognizance of when they were drafting the model GST law, and as on date what the law is, and as far as this particular issue is concerned, we do not expect very many changes. In fact, there's been news going on WhatsApp that the final law has already been leaked, though it has not been officially published. So the idea is that they have restricted the credit even in the GST regime. So bringing myself back to my question is, so if a credit is eligible today and also eligible tomorrow, and the credit provisions as far as GST is concerned has by and large been borrowed from the current SENVAT credit provisions. So basically you see, GST is a culmination of different acts and they have chosen to take the worst of every act. So when you talk about this matching principle, that was first, are all of you all aware about the matching principle? Yes? Under GST regime, that no credit will be allowed till and unless your vendor who has provided or supplied the service or goods to you has in turn paid the GST and filed the returns. So this is already in place as far as the West Bengal VAT is concerned, and I've been given to understand that this concept was first introduced by the Maharashtra government and then carried forward, and now it has been adopted by and large by a lot of people. So whatever credits are eligible today will be allowed to you tomorrow if your returns have been filed correctly. So just for the sake of reiteration on this point, the idea is do a credit analysis of your clients. Wherever you feel that there is certain credit which can be litigated, you avail the credits, because there is a time period within which you can avail the credit, which is a period of how many months or years under the current service tax regime?
Service tax, I don't know, where 2 years they are.
2 years, and in service tax it is 1 year. Initially it was 6 months.
One point I am saying, you are saying that 17th March, if you have filed some return under the VAT, credit is there. You are saying that you cannot revise. They are not amending the point that the revision period given under the VAT or service tax for return. So I will be governed by the Act is on 31st March. It says the revision. So even if my credit, there is some errors, human errors, can be rectified, and that credit is to be taken. Even
exactly,
the 31st March,
but as they say that it's better to be safe than sorry,
yeah, it's all
and
right,
hence
but that
I
period
completely
is-
concur with your view. I completely
Because
respect
there
and
is a
appreciate
provision
your.
which is to be parallel, because C-form is to be generated within say 6 months or whatever. They cannot say that we withdraw, you sue the C-form within say 10 days or 15 days, because GST is applicable. It will
So
be
in
back-
fact, as one planning tool, we also say whatever forms need to be procured should be procured within the 31st of March. But how much possible is it?
That is not-
It's very difficult. Like say for instance, bringing back myself even to the payment of reverse charge. Under service tax, you have to pay service tax within a certain period in order to avail the reverse service tax you pay on reverse charge, barring which the credit will be reversed and thereafter you can take it once you pay. So we say that bhai aap apna sara pay karke khatam karo so that you can keep the credit in your books. But when you talk about, see, I'll tell you the loopholes. Under service tax or under the SENVAT credit rules, there is a provision of reversal of credit if you are a service provider who is providing exempt services and taxable services. So they say that as per the calculation, you reverse the credit by the 30th of June of the following financial year. So for the year ending 2016-17, when do we reverse it? Will the same provisions apply? In fact, I'm sure a lot of you are aware of this professional forum called e-exchange, wherein a lot of chartered accountants and others post their query. So I was amazed to find a query by a chartered accountant yesterday or day before, wherein he said that my client is liable to be registered under VAT and his liability has already accrued, but should I take registration or shall I wait for GST to come? No, honestly, you can't wait for something to come, so whatever you need to do today needs to be done. In fact, when the model GST law was released, I got a call from my client who's in the business of car rental, and he asked me, I need to buy a Mercedes, should I buy it now or shall I buy it for GST, post GST? But friends, you really feel that the prices of commodities are dependent on taxation? What part? Personally,
Mercedes will make lot of difference.
Mercedes will, now that you have, I'm
Yeah.
sure all of you are
Say
aware
31st, before 31st it is cheap.
that you have 4 slabs under GST which the council has currently prescribed, wherein you will be having 5 rates and gold is at the loaner, which is at the lowest rate. So for SIM goods or luxurious goods, it's at as high as 28% plus another cess on that. But you see, when you talk about other services or goods, say for example Geo network, they are offering you free calls and free internet at the speed of God knows what, probably the same speed what the scientists at NASA get. That's not because he's got some tax benefits, because of the competition in the market. So you see, ultimately prices will rise and fall, but GST आने से भाई बहुत बढ़ जाएगा, मेरा क्या होगा? I do not subscribe to that view at all. Like, say for instance, I was at Bhubaneswar on Tuesday. When I came back, it's a relatively new airport, I think constructed 2 to 3 years back. And on the aisle I saw spits of pan. And they had very clearly mentioned that, you know, the person who's spitting will be fined XYZ amount. But do you think that fine will actually abstain that person from spitting? No, a person whose DNA is not to be clean will continue being so. So the idea is that GST is the biggest ever reform independent India has seen, and it's a life-changing experience and huge opportunities for chartered accountants, so on and so forth. Life will be same as it is today. And if you ask me in my professional opinion, I do not really see any problem or any issue that we face as assessees or professionals today within the framework of law, which could not have been achieved by amending the current provisions and getting this huge big GST. But kudos to the government for moving this far, and the finance minister has been very candid in actually saying that we'll be having a good GST. We will not be having an ideal GST. And for reasons best known to you and me, I generally don't make my deliberations political, but there is this big thing that GST is a consumption-based tax. That means what? That the taxes travel with the goods or services, and Bengal, being largely a consuming state, will be one of the states will be benefiting the most out of GST. But when the question came of ratifying the bill, we all know what happened, right? And hence, this brings me back, before I move on to the time and place of supply, very quickly, what do you mean by destiny? And again, you know, another problem that I foresee in GST is the states are still not at consensus with the center about what would happen to current assessees who are just under service tax, or current assessees who are under VAT and not service tax within, say, 1.5 crores of turnover. States are saying you give us assessees who have a turnover of within 1.5 crore. Center is saying, since you do not have any know-how on service tax, let us keep the control of all assessees who are under service tax and migrating to GST. So the idea of GST is one rate, one nation, one tax, one assessee, one authority. But let me tell you, on the second point, they still haven't reached consensus. When you talk about one nation, one tax. So today, we have a VAT rate of say 14.5% in Bengal for, say for example, this pen. The rate for the same pen may be 5% in Maharashtra or maybe some 2% in Orissa. So this was giving rise to a lot of rate wars. So your business decisions as a business person was guided more by the taxation structure rather than the business viewpoint. So this, I would say, to a large extent would go, not that all the rates of SGST will be common throughout. So they will be given a certain band of 1 or 2% plus or minus within which the states can operate. So you may be having a 10% SGST in Bengal, but a 12% in Maharashtra and maybe a 9% in Odisha. And we have also been given to understand that different provisions of the Act may be notified at different points in time. So I'm not foreseeing a scenario, but there may be a scenario where one state is agreeing to GST and another state is not agreeing to GST. So what would be the state of affairs then is a very big question. But nonetheless, since this is a big reform and a lot of effort has gone from the government side, who have been delving on this subject for not less than 10 years now, and when it came to taking or seeking opinions from the professional body, we were given just a period of a few weeks to revert on what GST is all about. So whatever you talk about GST will obviously be, I wouldn't really in my personal view say a game changer, but obviously exciting times. So as the अच्छे दिन वाला नारा जो बीजेपी का था, I don't know how अच्छे दिन is there for the other people. For you and me, there are a lot of अच्छे dins ahead. Because exciting times, new law, new version of the law. So coming back to the consumption-based tax. So that means what? Taxes are traveling with the goods and services, right? So in the short span of time that I was hearing your first half of the deliberation, so he gave an example wherein, say for instance, you are a person and you go to Delhi to avail the services. Well, you have an audit of Dena Bank, I think, and there you take the services of a hotel, right? So this is a simple example, not really a simple example. You have questions on the place of supply, time of supply. But here you know that the hotel in Delhi will be charging you GST. Now, so what happens is that the services are being consumed in Delhi, which is the consuming state? Which is the consuming state? Delhi. So the taxes will be going to the state of or the union territory of Delhi. So that is primarily what you mean by consumption based. When you talk about CST, which is origin based tax, whenever you charge CST, it goes, say for example, for an interstate sale from Bengal to Maharashtra. So the tax collection goes to the, it's a central levy, but the collection goes to the state government. That means it's an origin based tax. Now let me give you another example. How many of you all are here into audits? Or conduct audits or have done audits in the past? See, I need full hands. Half होने से I'll not ask you a question, don't worry. So it may be a situation wherein, say for example, you've got audit from a client who's got multiple offices and he wants you to do, say, a stock audit at Bengal, Bihar, Odisha, Maharashtra. And the head office is in Bengal and you have a contract of 1 lakh rupees and you will be conducting the audit across multiple locations, right? So there may be a scenario where you raise 25,000 worth of bills on each of these 4 offices and the GST would be going to the respective states. But logistically, it may be a challenge for you to actually do that. And you may want to raise a single bill because stock audit may be at Bengal, may be of a huge volume vis-a-vis the stock audit you are doing at Bhubaneswar. So business decisions, as I said, would be guided from a business angle rather than a tax angle. So now when you raise the bill on the head office in Bengal, so there you and your client are both within the state of Bengal. So what will you be charging on your bill? And? Right? So that means the entire revenue goes to the government of? So the other states may cry foul that bhai hamare yahan bhi services consume hui hain. So what happens to the GST share of Maharashtra, Bihar and say for example Orissa in my example. So these issues will be there. So how and how much can you substantiate that GST is a destination based tax is obviously a matter of concern when it comes to transactions like these. Now, so we have discussed the taxable event, we've discussed an overview, I've played a devil's advocate on what are the shortcomings of GST.